there's no question that there are a ton of questions and a ton of uncertainty when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers organization. Frankly, it's hard to figure out what they're really trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish. Is it a simple matter of Jed York and Trent Baalke trying to establish that they're the ones running the show? Is it a matter of they thought that they were close but not good enough and it was time to retool? I don't really know. I mean, but you're talking about a 49ers team that couldn't wait to get rid of Jim Harbaugh. And maybe they were right. And maybe they had their good reasons. Maybe. But sometimes be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. Now, you're talking also about a 49ers team that lost several key players on both sides of the ball, combined with the fact that this is a team that has not, frankly, drafted all that particularly well over the past few seasons, like I have discussed before in other previous videos. That to me made this 2015 NFL draft incredibly important for the San Francisco 49ers. And I really did not come away impressed with the 49ers at all. I'm really struggling to figure out what their rationale was. I'm really having a hard time trying to figure out what their philosophy was or if they even really had a philosophy. And if they did have a philosophy, why they had the philosophy that they did. I mean, you're talking about one of the big reasons that the 49ers struggled mightily in 2014. You have injuries, and some of the pieces that they've drafted over the past couple of years didn't effectively come in and fill roles. I mean, although you had guys like Chris Moreland that most certainly played well, but now Chris Moreland has retired and he's no longer in the fold, your third-round pick from 2014. But you're looking at the 49ers. They had injury problems on both sides of the ball. Aldon Smith was suspended for the first half of the season, and they really struggled to score points offensively on a consistent basis. Colin Kaepernick severely regressed in 2014, if you could even say that he had progressed that much in 2013. But there was definitely a step back in his game, and the offense of the 49ers lacked a consistent threat when it came to the passing game. They lacked explosive playmakers. Vernon Davis was old. Michael Crabtree was only somewhat effective. Anquan Bolden had his moments. Stevie Johnson was brought in, and he didn't do much. Just a lot of questions to me about the 49ers. So I thought heading into this draft that even though they had put Tom Sula in place as head coach, and he's a defensive-minded guy, that the 49ers were going to try to look to the offensive side of the ball early and often in this draft. Because as many losses as they had on the defense, with Patrick Willis and Chris Borland retiring, with Ray McDonald getting cut, Justin Smith retiring, and losing your two starting corners, you have needs on the defensive side of the ball, but your offense can't do anything consistently, and they can't score points. They're very limited, very, very one-dimensional. And then when you take into the account that you lose your best run blocker on your line in Mike Iupati in free agency to the Cardinals, you lose Frank Gore in free agency to the Indianapolis Colts, you lose Michael Crabtree to the Raiders. It's just a bad situation. You would have thought that the 49ers would have addressed the offensive side of the ball more, frankly, than what they really did. And looking at their draft, you could clearly see that they are still of the opinion as an organization that defense is the way to go, and defense is going to be the name of the game, and defense is going to be the way that they contend in that division, potentially win that division, and perhaps make it back to a Super Bowl. And while I understand the philosophy, because in some ways it was in large part off of the strength of their defense and their running game that they had so much success from 2011 to 2013, they ultimately didn't get the job done at the end of the day with that formula, with that format. So why go back to the well and try to repeat that again? I just really don't get it. And I look at their draft. To me, they reached on their first two picks. They reached somewhat on their first-round pick. They reached mightily perhaps on their second-round pick. Just a lot of things I really don't like about the 49ers draft. In terms of their best pick, I'll give them Eli Harold from Virginia. They got him in the third round. I thought that was decent value there. That was about where he should have went. And here's a guy that can come in, play alongside an Aldon Smith, who could give you some athleticism on the edge. You can never have too many edge rushers. I guess you could say that just about any position. You can never have too much of something. But the ability to rush the passer is of a premium importance in the NFL, and one way to have your defense make a quick turnaround in a hurry is to improve your pass rush. And bringing in a guy like Eli Harold, you would think, would help improve your pass rush for sure. In terms of a pick that could surprise, they kind of went that redshirt route again in the 4th round. Instead of it being a guy like a Tank Carradine or a Marcus Lattimore, they went with a DeAndre Smelter, the wide receiver from Georgia Tech. A big guy who can run, but a guy that is coming off of an ACL injury in December. So probably a guy that you put on the physically unable to perform list, perhaps even put him on injured reserve the entire year, and you end up with him in 2016 and beyond. Maybe he's a younger, cheaper version long-term of a Michael Crabtree for him. He's a guy that didn't get a lot of opportunities to shine in an option offense at Georgia Tech, but he's a guy who could be a more productive NFL player than he was a college player. But in terms of this draft in general, just second-guessing abound. I mean, you take Armstead at number 17. Yeah, it was great that they were able to trade back 2 picks, but maybe they should just sit there and take Melvin Gordon, or maybe they should sit there with the needs they had at corner and take a superior prospect in somebody like a Kevin Johnson or even a Marcus Peters. I just really don't understand why they were so infatuated with Armstead that they had to feel that they just had to take him at number 17. I thought there were better options there for them in round number 1, and especially with the loss of Upati, and I believe Boone is coming up at the end of his contract after this season. There's some needs there on the offensive line, and the offensive line value wasn't that terrible at that particular point in time in the draft. Why not maybe look to the offensive line and try to address that? Like I said, I just have a really hard time understanding this. I really have a hard time understanding Jaquiski Tartt, the safety from Samford, in round 2. I like Tartt, but I liked him more as a third, mid-third, late-third round type of prospect. Not only did the 49ers take him in round 2, but if I recall correctly, they traded up for him. All the while, you've got a tight end like a Max Williams on the board. Again, is Jaquiski Tartt going to be able to help out that offense in any way, shape, or form? No. And you also look at the fact that this is a 3rd consecutive draft that the San Francisco 49ers have spent a very high pick on a safety. First, it was Arik Reed, who they traded up to get in 2013. Then it was Jimmy Ward out of Northern Illinois in 2014. And now here, Jaquiski Tartt. I understand there's a lot more need to run alignments on defense with 3 safeties, and a guy like Jimmy Ward seems to profile in part as a slot corner in certain situations at the NFL level. But this wasn't a good safety class to begin with. And while you might have thought that Tartt wasn't going to be there in round 3, there were better players on the board, and in particular, better players on the offensive side for a team that needed to have some young fortification of the trenches on the offensive side of the ball, for a team that needed explosive playmakers outside at wide receiver and tight end on that offense. They spent their first 3 picks on the defensive side of the ball. And then when they did address the offense, they went after a converted quarterback, the tight end Blake Bell from Oklahoma. I mean, what are you doing? I like Mike Davis from South Carolina, but he's not really bringing much different to the table than a Carlos Hyde. He's just a smaller and slower version of him. And then even looking at a guy like Smelter, I named some of those other players that they kind of did the redshirt thing with. How did that really work? I mean, it hasn't really panned out all that much. And for all the people that love to praise the 49ers for the gambles that they take, those gambles really don't pay off in the past few years in this draft. I mean, this is a team that has spent high picks on guys like, who am I thinking of? Oh, yes, A.J. Jenkins, Michael James, Vance McDonald. I mean, is this team's draft history really that good? When you really sit down and examine it, no, they're not. And then in the 5th round, they're taking a freaking punter, for Christ's sakes. A punter. Because that's going to help out your offense tremendously. Look, at the end of the day, it probably wasn't going to matter much what the 49ers did in this draft. They've drafted poorly the past few seasons. It's a team that got old in a hurry, that lost talent on both sides of the ball, especially some of their biggest, most key players on both sides of the ball, with a quarterback who regressed significantly in 2014 in Colin Kaepernick. So it might not have made much of a difference. But the 49ers could have done better, and a whole lot better than what they did in this draft. To me, they were one of the biggest losers in the entire 2015 NFL draft, and I feel very confident in giving them a D grade. You look at Armstead. Here's a guy that you see the athletic skills, but man, they didn't translate much to the football field. And from a prospect standpoint, in terms of defensive lineman at Oregon, I was much higher on a DeForest Buckner, who will be in next year's draft, than I was in Arik Armstead, a guy who was in this year's draft. I mean, I don't get it. And sometimes, you're proven wrong. But with this 49ers draft, consider me unimpressed. And consider me questioning what the hell this organization's doing. And I know at this point in time that I'm not the only person doing that because a lot of 49ers fans are wondering the same damn thing.